Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to FAIR's podcast on immigration. And today, our guest will be Mr. Paweł Lisicki, who is a columnist, a writer, and editor-in-chief of Do Rzeczy. The weekly magazine Do Rzeczy is one of the most prominent conservative periodicals in Poland, and Mr. Lisicki is its founder and co-publisher. He's the author of numerous books on theology and history, as well as plays, novels, and collections of essays. He is also a regular guest on radio shows and current affairs programs on television. So as an astute observer of the political situation in Europe and in Poland, Mr. Lisicki can really shine a valuable light on mass immigration issues in the old continent for us today and why all of this matters from the American perspective. So welcome.
Mr. Lisicki, it's a pleasure to have you here. Let's start off by getting a broad view of what's going on. So what is your assessment of the current mass migration situation in Europe in general?
I would say that, generally speaking, the situation is a very negative one and a very bad one. Why? Because the main goal of the European politicians, I mean the establishment politicians, is just to get rid of national states or get rid of nations in Europe. And if you want to completely change the population in Europe, because that is the condition to abolish national state, you have to replace the population. That is a very consistent way of thinking, yes? And how you can do that? Just to put as many migrants, as many population from outside Europe to Europe, yeah? That is the main idea. So, in my opinion, the main reason, the real origin of all these problems connected with migration is not the economical one, but the ideological one. And this ideology means that we would like to get rid of national states. And it means to get rid of nations and to replace these old Western nations with something completely new. And in that respect, we try to attract, or we try to put, as I said, as many non-Western population to Europe. Yeah, that is the very general description of the situation. And because of that, and because of these ideological roots of the problem, the situation is so complicated that the European establishment behaves as if they were completely immutable in terms of any common sense. So they don't. There are no real answers. Why do we do that? Why we try to put so many people from Middle East or from North Africa to Europe? Yeah, because the answers which are given to us are completely unreasonable, and that makes the situation so, as I said, so bad and my view so pessimistic.
Is the situation in Poland as bad as it is in France and the UK, or is Poland still managing to push back against the EU mandate?
Yeah, surely the situation in Poland is not so bad as in other countries which you mentioned, like France or Great Britain. But unfortunately, the situation, in my opinion, is deteriorating. I will give you two examples just to show the real situation. In 2015, Law and Justice won the election, that is the Conservative Party, and promised the Law and Justice politicians promised that Poland would not follow the path which was taken by France, Spain, Great Britain, Germany, and so on. Unfortunately, even though they promised they wouldn't do that, the present situation in Poland is more similar, or is getting worse than it was in the past. Why? Because even though Poland didn't take or did not agree to take illegal migrants, still there is an enormous number of legal migrants, labor migrants or labor workers who came to Poland in that time. A very simple example I will give you. That was the main story in Polish media a year ago. A year ago, at the beginning of March, so the very similar period as we have now, all of a sudden, all Polish media, especially that was all Polish social media, put pictures from big Polish cities like Warsaw, Gdańsk, Wrocław, showing the start of Ramadan. You know, Poland is a very Catholic country and a Christian country, and actually nobody before knew that there exists something like Ramadan. That was completely new. But all of a sudden, on these pictures, they were shown thousands and thousands of Muslims who gathered because of this start of Ramadan in different Polish cities. And then that is the clear sign that unfortunately, in many respects, we go exactly in the same direction as the other countries, other states which we mentioned before us. Yeah, so that is the first sign, and the other one. A year ago, or 9 months ago, one of the most known Polish priests, that is the Archbishop of Łódź. He was the Archbishop of Łódź. Now he's the Archbishop of Kraków, and Cardinal Grzegorz Ryś, one of the most known Polish hierarchs, one of the most known Polish bishops. He wrote a special letter to Polish faithful Catholics in which he said that there is a new human right, the right to live in any place wherever you want to. So it's a completely absurd idea, according to which anybody can choose any place in the world to live on. Yeah, let's say if I would like to live in Rome or in Paris or in New York, that is according to this idea, that is my right. So there is a duty on the side of the particular state to find for me this place to live on. And unfortunately, that is the general idea of many other members of Polish hierarchy, of Polish Catholic hierarchy, which they strongly support. That is, as I said, another sign showing that not only the mistakes of political authorities, but also mistakes of religious ones, unfortunately, create this particular situation, which is a kind of threat for our identity and for our national sovereignty. Yeah.
In light of all this, do you think Polish public, Polish voters, do you think they are learning from the West's mistakes and from Poland's own mistakes when it comes to immigration policy?
Yes, I hope so, because we can also observe a very strong. There is more and more people who are aware of this threat, and they try to do everything just to stop it. Yes, so from that point of view, there is this kind of movement which was absent in these countries which we mentioned, and there is surely present in Poland. So from that respect, society as such, or more and more people in the society try to be against that, try to create a kind of common cause and to protest against this idea. But unfortunately, European Union tries to impose on Poland its new policy, so-called migration pact, according to which migration pact each member state of European Union would have to take a particular number of migrants or refugees coming just from Middle East or from Africa. And Polish government, the government of Mr. Donald Tusk, they try to pretend that they are against that, but actually they support it. Fortunately, the present opposition, Law and Justice, and not only Law and Justice, but two other conservative parties, are very strong against that. So, in that respect, I would say that the society is more and more aware, and the protests are growing, and we try to stop this wave of migrants coming to Poland.
Now, Migration was the driving issue in the last election here in the United States. Do you think mass migration is going to affect the next round of Polish elections?
Yes, surely that could be one of the main topics during this next round of Polish election. As I said, in 2015, that was the situation after the enormous wave of migrants from Syria came to Europe. And in 2014, Miss Angela Merkel, she was then Chancellor of Germany, all of a sudden declared, we are going to take them all to Europe, especially to Germany. And she said that we are going to support a kind, she said it was this Willkommenkultur, welcome culture. So in that way, Germany took 1 million or even more migrants from Syria and from Middle East. And at that time, I mean, in 2015, there was a electoral campaign in Poland, and Law and Justice won this campaign in October because Law and Justice promised we are not going to follow this path. Yeah, we are against that. We promise you, we are against that. And also, if I observe the present discussion, the present debate in Poland, I clearly see that most of the Poles are against this kind of solution, and actually free right parties or free conservative parties in Poland, Law and Justice, Konfederacja and Konfederacja of Grzegorz Braun, are very strongly, they raise this problem, they raise this topic, and because of that, the support for them is growing. So I'm sure that will be one of the main topics during our campaign.
Now, have Western elites been simply naive and short-sighted in allowing unchecked mass migration over the past several decades, or are there deeper cultural and philosophical reasons behind these misguided open borders policies? I know before you mentioned that this is mainly an ideological issue to dismantle nation states.
As I mentioned, unfortunately, it is not naivety. It is not that they are unaware of what they are doing. In my opinion, there is a project, a plan which is prepared just to be introduced, just to be implemented. And if you know that the ideological roots of present European Union is so-called Declaration of Spinelli. Spinelli, that was an Italian communist who prepared a kind of vision for Europe in the 40s, so just after the Second World War. And if you read this manifesto, this declaration, this appeal, because there are different names, and you see in this declaration that for Spinelli, who is the spiritual father of present European establishment, it is very clearly seen and very clearly stated that there shouldn't be any nations, because nations as such are a threat for peace and for development and for welfare and so on. So if you accept this presumption, if you accept this situation, this statement that the nations as such are a threat for future, you have to, as I said, you have to get rid of nations. Yeah, that is exactly the idea. And that is the idea which makes this problem so difficult. It is not, there are of course some economical arguments. For example, people say, okay, we should bring more migrants to Europe because of the demography problem. Yeah. But all the real analysis which I read show that the migrants or the mass migrants who came to Europe in last 15 or 20 or 30 years, they didn't solve any kind of problems, but they delivered new problems to the situation. Massive criminality, enormous this so-called ghettoization problem. The situation in which the society, the social tensions are growing very quickly, the enormous expenditures of money, of funds, just to keep any kind of lack of war in the society. Yeah, the so-called no-go zones which are visible in these countries. So if we take into account only the how to call it, only the reasonable arguments, you can clearly see that it cannot be just a problem of that is not rational. Yeah, that must be something different behind this idea. And in my opinion, this real source of this migration ideology is, as I said, that they want to abolish the present national states, nation states, and to create a new utopia of a society without nations, or of the new European society. And by the way, that is a very interesting thing. Just 2 months ago, that was a declaration of one of the Spanish politicians. She is the member of Podemos. Podemos, that's one of the very leftist party in Spain, and she crystal clear said that our goal is just to replace the present Spanish population with a new one. So it is not any kind of conspiracy theory. It is just the clear declaration of one of the very significant politicians from Spain, and she just declared that. So it is a kind of let's say confirmation of my of my suggestion of this theory.
So a good friend of mine sent me a clip that went around Polish social media that was quite funny, and it had a West African migrant at a gas station filling up his car, and a Middle Eastern migrant walked in front of him. And the West African migrant, in very poor Polish, but in Polish nonetheless, yelled at him, "Get out of my country, I'm a Pole." Mm-hmm. So clearly, while assimilation is still a problem, Poland and Hungary as well seem to be doing a much better job of requiring migrants to assimilate. So what is your advice to countries like the United States that want to get their migrant populations to assimilate and become American?
It's a very difficult, very difficult question because actually I'm afraid, or that is my position, that the Polish policy of Joe Biden policy, which was conducted in last 4 years, that was a catastrophe. So
yes, it was.
Yeah, there was a catastrophe. So that was a completely stupid idea, just to take all the migrants to United States without any conditions. Yeah. So if I'm not against any kind of migration policy, of course, I think that there are it is possible to, and the United States actually conducted a very reasonable migration policy before. Yeah. But what it means that it should be reasonable, and what it means that it should be rational. There should be a very clearly stated conditions under which somebody could come to this particular country and to be a citizen of that country. Yeah, for example, knowledge of language, skills, education. That should be all fulfilled, that somebody could become a real citizen or a worker in that particular country. Yeah, and without that, there is no any kind of policy. That is a chaos. Yeah, that is a situation in which you are not able to take control over that what is happening, and in that way you only create new problems which are not being which couldn't be solved. So if I could advise anything, just do the same as Mr. Trump started to do. So first of all, let's try to transfer these illegal migrants as many as it is only possible. That is the first condition. And secondly, try the ones who stay or are members of the society, just to make them accept the rules which should be common for everybody. And if they not able to accept the rules, unfortunately, you have to take them out.
Thank you so much for that. That's all the time that we have today, but it was a great pleasure speaking to you and learning from your insights straight from Europe. And we hope to do this again in the future.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It was also a great pleasure for me. Thank you very much.